The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine courtyard of Buckingham Palace as Prince George walked quietly through the gardens. At 12 years old, he had grown accustomed to the weight of royal expectations, but today felt different somehow. The usual bustle of palace staff seemed subdued, and even the guards standing at their posts appeared more solemn than usual. George had always been curious about the people who worked tirelessly to maintain the palace. Unlike many of his royal relatives, he made it a point to acknowledge the staff with genuine smiles and polite greetings. His tutors often reminded him that a future king must understand all levels of society, but for George it came naturally. He genuinely cared about others. As he rounded the corner near the East Wing, George noticed something unusual. Guard Williams, a man he had seen countless times but never really spoken to, was sitting on a small bench tucked behind a pillar. The guard's head was buried in his hands and his shoulders shook slightly. George had never seen a palace guard display such emotion while on duty. Guard Williams had served the royal family for 15 years. He was known among his colleagues for his unwavering dedication and professional demeanor. Never once had he been late for duty. Never once had he shown anything but complete composure. But today everything felt overwhelming. The letter he had received that morning weighed heavily in his uniform pocket, and despite his best efforts, he could not shake the devastating news it contained. George hesitated for a moment, unsure whether he should approach. Royal protocol suggested he should continue on his way, perhaps inform someone else about the guard's unusual behavior. But something deeper than protocol stirred within him. He remembered his mother's words about compassion being the most important quality a leader could possess. Quietly, George approached the bench. Guard Williams looked up, startled, and immediately began to stand, his training kicking in despite his emotional state. His eyes were red, and he struggled to regain his composure in front of the young prince. "Please don't get up," George said softly, his voice carrying a maturity beyond his years. "Are you all right, sir?" Guard Williams was taken aback by the genuine concern in the prince's voice. In all his years of service, no member of the royal family had ever asked about his well-being with such sincerity. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. "I'm sorry, Your Highness," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I shouldn't be. This isn't appropriate." George sat down beside him on the bench, ignoring every rule of royal protocol he had ever been taught. "Sometimes being appropriate isn't as important as being human," he said, surprising himself with his own words. The guard looked at the young prince, seeing not a future king but a caring child, who seemed to understand pain in a way that defied his privileged upbringing. Slowly, the story began to pour out. Guard Williams spoke of his daughter, Emma, who had been battling a rare illness for months. The letter that morning had brought news that her condition was worsening, and the treatments were no longer working. As a single father, Guard Williams had dedicated his life to two things: serving the crown and caring for his daughter. The palace job provided the stability and insurance that Emma needed, but it also meant long hours away from her side. He spoke of the guilt he felt standing guard while his little girl fought her biggest battle alone. George listened intently, his young heart breaking for this man who had sacrificed so much. He thought about his own relationship with his father and how important those moments together were. He couldn't imagine the pain of being separated from family during such a difficult time. "How old is Emma?" George asked gently. "She's 8, Your Highness. She loves to draw and always asks me to tell her stories about the palace. She dreams of being a princess someday." Guard Williams smiled weakly through his tears. George was quiet for a moment, processing everything he had heard. Then, with a determination that surprised them both, he stood up. "What hospital is she at?" Guard Williams looked confused. "St. Mary's Children's Hospital, Your Highness." "But I don't understand why." "Because," George said, his voice filled with conviction, "if she dreams of being a princess, then perhaps it's time she met a real prince." The guard's eyes widened in disbelief. He began to protest, explaining that he couldn't possibly ask such a thing of the royal family, that it would be inappropriate, that his personal problems shouldn't burden the prince. But George had already made up his mind. He had been raised to understand that with great privilege comes great responsibility, and he suddenly understood what that truly meant. It wasn't just about fulfilling royal duties or attending state functions. It was about using his position to bring light into the darkness that others faced. "I need to speak with my private secretary," George said. his mind already working through the logistics. "And I'll need to talk to my parents, of course. But Guard Williams," he paused, looking directly into the man's eyes. "I promise you this won't be forgotten." As George walked away, leaving Guard Williams sitting in stunned silence, the afternoon sun began to filter through the palace windows differently. Something had shifted in those quiet moments behind the pillar, something that would ripple through the palace walls and beyond. Guard Williams sat there for several minutes after the prince had left, trying to process what had just occurred. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined that his moment of vulnerability would be met with such kindness and immediate action from someone so young yet so important. He slowly stood up, straightened his uniform, and returned to his post. But something had changed within him too. The weight of his worries hadn't disappeared, but somehow they felt more manageable. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. The palace continued its daily rhythm around them, but both the prince and the guard carried something new in their hearts. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest acts of human kindness, and today had proven that even within the formal walls of royalty, compassion could bridge any gap between two people who might otherwise never have truly seen each other. Prince George walked briskly through the palace corridors, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. He had never felt such urgency about anything in his young life. The image of Guard Williams sitting alone with his pain haunted him, and he knew he couldn't simply return to his regular schedule of lessons and royal obligations. His first stop was the office of Mrs. Henderson, his private secretary and one of the few adults in the palace who truly understood his compassionate nature. She had worked with the royal family for over 2 decades and had watched George grow from a curious toddler into a thoughtful young man. "Mrs. Henderson," George said as he entered her office, slightly out of breath from his hurried walk, "I need your help with something very important." She looked up from her desk, immediately noting the determination in his voice and the unusual intensity in his eyes. "Of course, Your Highness. What can I do for you?" George explained the situation carefully, watching as Mrs. Henderson's expression shifted from professional attention to genuine concern. He spoke about Guard Williams, about Emma, and about his desire to visit the little girl in the hospital. Mrs. Henderson listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making small notes. When George finished, she was quiet for a moment, considering the implications of such a visit. Hospital visits by members of the royal family required extensive security arrangements, medical clearances, and careful coordination with multiple departments. "Your Highness," she began carefully, "what you're proposing is both wonderful and complicated. A visit to the children's hospital would need approval from your parents, coordination with security, and arrangements with the hospital administration. It's not impossible, but it will take time." "How much time?" George asked, the urgency clear in his voice. "At least a week, possibly 2, to arrange everything properly." George's face fell. He thought of Guard Williams returning to his post every day, carrying that weight of worry, and of little Emma waiting in her hospital bed. "That's too long," he said quietly. "Isn't there something we can do sooner?" Mrs. Henderson studied the young prince's face and saw something that impressed her deeply. This wasn't a child's whim or a desire for attention. This was genuine compassion, paired with a sense of responsibility that went far beyond his years. "Let me make some calls," she said finally. "Perhaps we can arrange something smaller first, something that doesn't require such extensive protocols." While Mrs. Henderson began making discreet inquiries, George sought out his parents. He found them in the blue drawing room, reviewing documents for an upcoming state dinner. His father, Prince William, looked up as George entered, immediately sensing his son's serious mood. "George, you look like you have something important to discuss," his father said, setting aside his papers. George took a deep breath and began to explain the morning's events. He spoke about Guard Williams, the conversation they had shared, and his desire to help. As he talked, he watched his parents' faces carefully, trying to gauge their reactions. Princess Catherine reached for her husband's hand as George described Emma's condition. As a mother herself, the story of a father struggling to balance work and his sick child's needs touched her deeply. "You spoke with Guard Williams personally?" Prince William asked, his tone neutral but his eyes showing interest. "Yes, sir. He was upset and I couldn't just walk past him. I know it might not have been proper protocol, but it felt like the right thing to do." Prince William exchanged a meaningful look with his wife. They had always hoped their children would grow up understanding their privilege came with responsibility. But seeing George demonstrate this naturally filled them with pride. "And you want to visit his daughter in the hospital?" Catherine asked gently. "I do. But Mrs. Henderson says it's complicated. I was wondering if there might be another way. Something we could do that would help Emma and show Guard Williams that his service to our family matters to us." William stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where palace staff continued their daily work. He thought about his own childhood, the lessons he had learned about service and duty, and the man his son was becoming. "George," he said, turning back to face his family, "what you've described shows remarkable maturity and compassion. But royal visits to hospitals require extensive planning for good reasons. We need to consider security, medical protocols, and the impact on other patients and families." George's shoulders slumped slightly, but his father continued. "However," William said, a slight smile appearing on his face, "there might be another approach. What if we invited Emma and Guard Williams here, to the palace when she's well enough to travel? We could arrange a private tea, something special just for her." George's face lit up immediately. The idea was perfect. It would be easier to arrange, less disruptive than a hospital visit, and would give Emma the princess experience she had dreamed about. "Could we really do that?" George asked excitedly. Catherine nodded. "We would need to coordinate with her medical team to ensure she's strong enough for the visit, but yes, I think that's something we could arrange much more quickly than a hospital visit." Over the next hour, the royal family worked together to develop a plan. Mrs. Henderson was called back to the drawing room, and together they discussed the logistics. The private secretary made notes about medical consultations, security briefings, and the various departments that would need to be involved. "The beautiful thing about hosting Emma here," Mrs. Henderson observed, "is that we can tailor the experience specifically for her. We can arrange for her to see parts of the palace that most visitors never see, perhaps even meet some of the horses if she's interested." George's excitement grew with each detail they discussed. He suggested showing Emma the throne room, the ballroom where state dinners were held, and perhaps even the kitchen where the royal meals were prepared. He wanted her to feel like a real princess, even if just for one afternoon. "There's something else," George said thoughtfully. "Guard Williams mentioned that Emma loves to draw. What if we arranged for her to meet one of the palace artists? Maybe she could create something while she's here." His parents exchanged another proud look. Their son wasn't just thinking about a nice gesture. He was considering what would truly bring joy to a sick child. As the afternoon wore on, the plan took shape. They would invite Emma and her father for a private tea the following week, assuming her doctors approved the visit. It would be informal, just the royal family and their guests, with no media or official photographers. "One more thing," George said as they finalized the details. "I'd like to speak with Guard Williams myself, to invite him personally. I think it would mean more coming directly from me." William nodded approvingly. "That's very thoughtful, son. But perhaps you should wait until we have confirmation from the doctors that Emma is well enough for the visit. We don't want to raise hopes if it's not possible." George agreed, though his impatience was evident. As the meeting concluded and the family dispersed to their various evening obligations, George couldn't stop thinking about Emma and the surprise they were planning. That night, as he lay in bed, George reflected on the day's events. He thought about how a single moment of choosing compassion over protocol had led to something much larger. He was beginning to understand what his father meant when he spoke about the weight of royal responsibility, but also its incredible potential for good. The palace around him hummed with its usual evening activities, but something had shifted in its very foundations. An act of kindness was rippling outward, touching lives in ways that would resonate far beyond the palace walls. The next morning brought a flurry of activity behind the scenes at Buckingham Palace. Mrs. Henderson had been busy since dawn, making discreet phone calls to St. Mary's Children's Hospital and coordinating with various palace departments. The plan to invite Emma and Guard Williams to the palace was moving forward, but it required careful orchestration. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Emma's primary physician, received the call with professional composure, though privately she was astonished. In her 15 years of pediatric medicine, she had never been contacted by Buckingham Palace regarding one of her patients. "I need to ask about Emma Williams," Mrs. Henderson explained carefully. "Her father works here at the palace and the royal family would like to arrange a special visit for Emma. assuming her medical condition permits it. Dr. Mitchell pulled up Emma's file on her computer, reviewing the latest test results and treatment notes. The little girl had been through so much over the past months, enduring treatments that would challenge even the strongest adults. Recently, however, there had been some encouraging signs. Emma has had a few better days this week, Dr. Mitchell said thoughtfully. Her energy levels have improved and she's been asking about going home. A short visit might actually be beneficial for her psychologically as long as we take proper precautions. Mrs. Henderson felt relief wash over her. What kind of precautions would be necessary? Emma would need to wear a medical mask for protection, and we'd want to limit her exposure time. No more than 2 hours initially, and we'd need to monitor her closely for any signs of fatigue. Also, anyone she interacts with should be in good health. No colds or flu symptoms. As the medical clearance was being arranged, word of the planned visit began to spread quietly through certain circles of the palace staff. Security personnel needed to be briefed, catering staff required special instructions, and the housekeeping team was asked to ensure certain rooms were immaculately prepared. Guard Williams reported for his morning shift, completely unaware of the plans being made on his behalf. He had spent a difficult night worrying about Emma, who had seemed particularly tired during his brief evening visit to the hospital. The conversation with Prince George felt almost dreamlike now, too remarkable to seem real. As he took his position at the East Wing entrance, Guard Williams tried to focus on his duties. The morning was crisp and clear, with tourists already gathering outside the palace gates hoping for a glimpse of the royal family. He watched the familiar rhythm of palace life unfold around him, but his mind kept drifting to the hospital room where his daughter lay fighting her brave battle. Around mid-morning, Prince George appeared in the courtyard with his tutor, Mr. Davies, for their scheduled outdoor history lesson. The lesson was about the role of the monarchy in British society, and George found himself more engaged than usual, thinking about the practical applications of everything they discussed. "Your Highness seems particularly focused today," Mr. Davies observed as they walked past the guard stations. "I've been thinking about what it really means to serve people," George replied, glancing briefly at Guard Williams. "Not just the ceremonial parts, but the real ways we can make a difference in people's lives." Mr. Davies followed George's gaze and noticed the guard standing at attention. He had heard whispers among the staff about something special being planned, but the details remained confidential. "Service comes in many forms," Mr. Davies said wisely. "Sometimes the most meaningful acts are the ones that happen away from public attention. The personal connections that remind us of our shared humanity." Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Henderson, approaching across the courtyard. She moved with purpose but maintained the discreet manner that had served her well throughout her palace career. "Your Highness," she said with a slight bow, "might I have a word with you privately?" George's heart raced as he followed Mrs. Henderson to a quiet alcove. He had been hoping for news about Emma all morning. "The doctors have given their approval," Mrs. Henderson said with a warm smile. "Emma is well enough for a short visit, and her father has been granted special leave for tomorrow afternoon." George felt a surge of excitement so strong he had to resist the urge to jump up and down. "Tomorrow, really? Have they been told yet?" "Not yet," Mrs. Henderson replied. "Your father thought you might like to deliver the invitation personally, as you suggested yesterday." George nodded eagerly, then paused. "How should I approach Guard Williams? I mean, what's the proper way to do this?" Mrs. Henderson appreciated his thoughtfulness. "Perhaps during his afternoon break. I can arrange for you to meet him in the staff garden, somewhere private where you can speak freely." As the afternoon approached, George found it increasingly difficult to concentrate on his regular lessons. His mind kept rehearsing what he would say to Guard Williams, how he would explain the invitation without overwhelming the man who had already been through so much emotion. At 3 o'clock, Mrs. Henderson discreetly approached Guard Williams during his rotation change. "Williams," she said formally, "Prince George has requested a brief meeting with you in the staff garden. Please follow me." Guard Williams felt his stomach drop. Had his emotional display yesterday been reported? Was he in trouble for speaking so openly with the prince? He followed Mrs. Henderson with growing anxiety, trying to maintain his composure. The staff garden was a small, peaceful space behind the palace where employees could take their breaks away from public view. Prince George was waiting on a bench beneath an old oak tree. looking both excited and nervous. "Thank you." "Mrs. Henderson," George said as she discreetly withdrew to give them privacy. Guard Williams stood at attention, unsure of the proper protocol for this unusual situation. "Please, sit down," George said, gesturing to the space beside him on the bench. "I have some news about Emma." Williams felt his heart begin to race. News about Emma delivered by a member of the royal family could only mean something extraordinary, though he couldn't imagine what. George took a deep breath, suddenly feeling the weight of the moment. "My family and I would like to invite you and Emma to the palace tomorrow afternoon for a private tea. The doctors say she's well enough for a short visit, and we thought she might enjoy seeing the palace and meeting a real prince and princess." Guard Williams stared at George in complete disbelief. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. After a moment, tears began to flow down his cheeks, but this time they were tears of gratitude and amazement rather than despair. "Your Highness," he whispered, "I don't know what to say. This is beyond anything I could have imagined." George felt his own eyes growing moist as he watched the impact of their gesture. "You don't have to say anything. Just bring Emma tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Mrs. Henderson will coordinate with the hospital for transportation, and we'll make sure everything is perfect for her." "She's going to be so excited," Guard Williams said, his voice shaking with emotion. "She talks about princesses and castles all the time. When she finds out she's actually going to meet real royalty and see inside the palace, I can't even imagine her reaction." George smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that he had never experienced before. This was what true satisfaction felt like. Not the hollow pleasure of receiving gifts or praise, but the deep joy that came from giving something meaningful to someone else. "There's one more thing," George added. "My mother mentioned that Emma likes to draw. We've arranged for her to meet one of our court artists, and she can create something special while she's here, something she can take home with her." Guard Williams buried his face in his hands for a moment, overwhelmed by the kindness being shown to his family. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with a hope that had been absent for months. "Your Highness," he said formally, "I have served the royal family for 15 years, but I have never understood the true meaning of that service until today. This kindness, this compassion for a simple guard and his sick daughter, it shows me what nobility really means." As they parted ways, both the prince and the guard carried something new in their hearts. George felt the profound satisfaction that comes from using one's position and privilege to bring joy to others. Guard Williams felt a renewed sense of pride in his service, and a hope for his daughter's happiness that he hadn't dared to feel in months. The palace continued its stately rhythm around them, but tomorrow would bring something special. A reminder that behind all the ceremony and tradition, the royal family remained at its heart a family capable of extraordinary compassion. The morning of Emma's visit dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself was cooperating with the special day ahead. Inside St. Mary's Children's Hospital, 8-year-old Emma Williams sat on her hospital bed, her eyes wide with disbelief as her father explained what was about to happen. "You mean real princes and princesses, Daddy?" Emma asked for the 10th time, her small hands clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Like in the stories you tell me?" Guard Williams knelt beside her bed, his heart full as he watched excitement replace the weariness that had shadowed his daughter's face for so many months. "Just like in the stories, sweetheart. Prince George himself invited you to have tea at Buckingham Palace." Emma's nurse, Sister Mary, bustled around the room preparing for the visit. She had been caring for Emma since her admission and had never seen the little girl so animated. The child who usually needed encouragement to get out of bed was now practically bouncing with anticipation. "Now remember, Emma," Sister Mary said gently as she helped her into a special dress that Guard Williams had brought from home. "You'll need to wear your mask for protection, but that doesn't mean you can't have fun. And if you get tired, you must tell your daddy right away." Emma nodded solemnly, understanding the importance of following medical instructions, but nothing could dampen her excitement. She had been drawing pictures of castles and princesses since she learned to hold a crayon, and now she was going to see a real palace. At Buckingham Palace, preparations were in full swing. The kitchen staff had prepared a special afternoon tea with child-friendly treats alongside the traditional offerings. Mrs. Henderson had coordinated with the palace florists to arrange fresh flowers in the private dining room, and the security team had planned the most discreet and welcoming entry route possible. Prince George had barely slept the night before, his mind racing with plans for Emma's visit. He had asked his parents dozens of questions about what they should show her, how to make her feel special, and whether she might be overwhelmed by the grandeur of the palace. The most important thing, Princess Catherine had told him during breakfast, is to follow Emma's lead. Let her curiosity guide the visit. Some children are fascinated by the grand rooms, others prefer to hear stories about the people who lived here. Prince William had nodded in agreement. Remember, George, you're not just showing her around a building. You're sharing a piece of history and making memories that will last her lifetime. As 2 o'clock approached, George found himself stationed near the entrance that had been chosen for Emma's arrival. His parents joined him, both dressed casually but elegantly, wanting to create a welcoming rather than intimidating atmosphere. The palace car that had been sent to collect Emma and her father pulled through the gates precisely on time. Inside, Emma pressed her face to the window, her eyes growing wider with each passing second. The palace grounds seemed to stretch forever, with perfectly manicured gardens and guards in their traditional uniforms standing at attention. "It's even bigger than in my drawings," Emma whispered, her voice filled with awe. Guard Williams squeezed her hand gently, still hardly believing this moment was real. Yesterday he had been a worried father watching his daughter suffer, and today he was bringing her to meet the royal family. The transformation felt miraculous. As the car came to a stop, Prince George stepped forward, followed by his parents. Emma had expected royalty to be distant and formal, but the young prince who approached their car looked friendly and approachable, dressed in simple clothes with a warm smile on his face. "Emma," George said as her father helped her out of the car, "I'm so glad you could come today. I've been looking forward to meeting you." Emma looked up at the prince with wonder, then performed a small curtsy that she had practiced with the hospital nurses. "Thank you for inviting me, Your Highness," she said in her small, clear voice. Princess Catherine knelt down to Emma's level, her motherly instincts immediately engaged. "You look beautiful today, Emma. That's a lovely dress." Emma beamed behind her medical mask, feeling like a real princess already. "My daddy bought it special for today. He said I needed something fit for a palace." Prince William stepped forward to greet Guard Williams with a firm handshake. "Williams, thank you for your continued service to our family. We're honored to meet your daughter." Guard Williams felt tears threatening again, but managed to maintain his composure. "The honor is entirely ours, Your Royal Highness. Emma has talked of nothing else since yesterday." As they moved toward the palace entrance, George walked beside Emma, adjusting his pace to match her smaller steps. Despite her illness, she moved with determination and curiosity, her eyes taking in every detail of the grand facade. "Would you like to see the throne room first?" George asked. "That's where my great-grandmother used to meet with important visitors from around the world." Emma nodded eagerly, though she wasn't entirely sure what a throne room was. As they walked through the corridors, George provided a running commentary designed specifically for an 8-year-old's understanding. "Those paintings are really old," he explained as they passed portraits of long-dead monarchs. "Some of them are older than your great-great-great-grandmother would have been. Did they really live here?" Emma asked, her voice echoing slightly in the grand hallway. "They did. And do you know what? Some of them were children when they first came here, just like you're a child visiting today." When they reached the throne room, Emma gasped audibly. The red and gold furnishings, the crystal chandeliers, and the ornate throne itself exceeded anything she had imagined in her drawings. Can I sit on the throne?" she asked hesitantly. George looked at his parents, who nodded with warm smiles. "Of course," he said. "Every princess should sit on a throne at least once." As Emma climbed carefully onto the throne, her father took pictures with a camera that Mrs. Henderson had discreetly provided. The little girl sat with perfect posture, her hands folded in her lap, looking every inch the royal she had always dreamed of being. "How do I look, Daddy?" she called out. "Like a true princess," Guard Williams replied, his voice thick with emotion. From the throne room, they moved to the blue drawing room, where afternoon tea had been set up. The table was arranged with delicate china, finger sandwiches, scones with jam and cream, and an assortment of cakes that made Emma's eyes light up with delight. "I've never seen so much food just for tea," she marveled as they sat down. Princess Catherine served the tea personally, treating Emma with the same attention she would give any honored guest. "What's your favorite kind of cake, Emma?" "Chocolate," Emma replied immediately, then added politely, Please, Your Highness. Excellent choice, George said, cutting a generous slice of chocolate cake for her. That's my favorite too. As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally. Emma told them about her drawings, her stuffed animals, and her dreams of becoming an artist when she grew up. The royal family listened with genuine interest, asking questions and encouraging her aspirations. Speaking of art, Princess Catherine said as they finished their tea, "We have a special surprise for you." Mrs. Henderson appeared at the doorway with a distinguished gentleman carrying an easel and art supplies. Emma's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. "Emma," George said with evident pleasure in his voice, "I'd like you to meet Mr. Christopher Wells, one of the palace's finest artists. He's going to help you create something special to take home." Emma looked from the artist to the art supplies to the royal family, her small face radiating pure joy. This day was becoming more magical than any story her father had ever told her, and she was living it herself. The afternoon was unfolding perfectly, each moment adding to what was clearly becoming one of the most special days in a little girl's life. Mr. Christopher Wells had been a court artist for over 20 years, having painted portraits of various royal family members and created works commemorating important state occasions. However, he had never been asked to work with a child patient from a hospital, and he approached the task with both professional skill and genuine warmth. "What would you like to paint today, Emma?" he asked as he set up his easel in a corner of the drawing room, where the light was particularly good. "Perhaps something to remember your special day at the palace?" Emma considered this seriously, her small brow furrowed in concentration. She looked around the magnificent room, taking in the ornate furniture, the crystal chandeliers, and the beautiful paintings that adorned the walls. "I want to paint the palace," she said finally, "but not just the building. I want to paint how it feels to be here, how happy and magical it is." Mr. Wells smiled at her thoughtful response. "That sounds like a wonderful idea. Let's start with some basic sketches and you can tell me what colors make you feel happy and magical." As Emma began to work with the artist, Prince George sat nearby, fascinated by her creative process. He watched as she confidently chose bright yellows and warm pinks, explaining that these were the colors of joy and kindness. "The window should be gold," Emma declared, carefully applying paint with a small brush. "Because when nice people live inside, the window should sparkle like sunshine," Princess Catherine observed from across the room, touched by the child's innocent wisdom. There was something profound in Emma's desire to paint feelings rather than just appearances, something that spoke to a deep understanding of what truly mattered. Guard William stood a respectful distance away, still hardly believing he was watching his daughter create art in the presence of the royal family. Every few minutes Emma would look up from her painting to smile at him, her eyes bright with happiness above her medical mask. "Daddy, look," she called out as she added small figures to her palace painting. "I'm putting all of us in the picture, see? There's Prince George and Princess Catherine and Prince William and you and me." The figures were simple, as one might expect from an 8-year-old, but they were painted with such care and attention that their joy was unmistakable. Each person in Emma's painting had a smile, and they were all holding hands in front of the golden-windowed palace. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Guard William said, his voice catching slightly. "It shows exactly how special today has been." As Emma continued to paint, Prince George found himself drawn into conversation with her about art and creativity. Despite their age difference and vastly different circumstances, they discovered a shared appreciation for the way colors could express emotions. "What's your favorite color, Prince George?" Emma asked as she worked on painting flowers in the palace garden. "I've always liked blue," George replied thoughtfully. "It reminds me of the sky on clear days when everything seems possible." "That's a good choice," Emma said seriously. "Blue is the color of dreams coming true. That's why I'm putting blue clouds in my painting, even though clouds aren't usually blue." Mr. Wells watched this exchange with professional interest. He had seen many accomplished adult artists struggle to express such pure emotional truth in their work. Yet this sick child was doing it naturally, without any pretense or technical concerns. After an hour of painting, Emma began to show signs of fatigue. Sister Mary, who had accompanied them to monitor Emma's condition, noticed immediately and approached discreetly. "How are you feeling, darling?" she asked quietly. "Do you need to rest for a moment?" Emma looked at her painting, which was nearly complete, then at the royal family who had shown her such kindness. I'm a little tired, she admitted, but I want to finish my picture. It's almost done. Prince William stepped forward gently. Emma, would you like to take a short break? We could show you one more special place in the palace, somewhere you can sit quietly for a few minutes. Emma nodded gratefully, and George led them to a small balcony that overlooked the palace gardens. The afternoon sun was beginning to lower in the sky, casting everything in a warm, golden light that seemed to enhance the magic of the day. This is where I like to come when I want to think, George told Emma, as they settled into comfortable chairs. You can see the whole garden from here, and sometimes you can spot squirrels running between the trees. Emma leaned forward eagerly, scanning the gardens below. Sure enough, a red squirrel appeared on one of the oak trees, and she clapped her hands in delighted recognition. He's so cute, she exclaimed. Do you think he lives here all the time? I think he does, George replied. The palace is his home just like it's my family's home. Everyone deserves a safe, happy place to live. As they watched the gardens together, Emma asked questions about the flowers, the trees, and the various birds they could see. Her curiosity seemed endless despite her obvious tiredness, and George answered each question with patience and enthusiasm. Princess Catherine joined them on the balcony, bringing a warm blanket to wrap around Emma's shoulders. You've been so busy today, she said kindly. Would you like something to drink? Perhaps some warm cocoa? That sounds wonderful, Emma replied politely. This has been the best day of my whole life. The simple sincerity of her statement affected everyone present. Guard Williams felt his eyes welling up again as he realized how much joy this single afternoon had brought to his daughter, after so many difficult months. When they returned to the drawing room, Emma insisted on completing her painting. With Mr. Wells' gentle guidance, she added the final touches, small hearts floating above the palace to represent all the love and kindness she had experienced. It's finished, she announced proudly, stepping back to admire her work. The painting was far from technically perfect, but it captured something essential that no professional portrait could have achieved. It radiated pure happiness and showed the palace not as a formal institution, but as a place where wonderful things could happen, where kindness was more important than protocol. Emma, Prince William said as he studied her artwork, this is absolutely magnificent. You've painted our home exactly as we hope people see it, as a place of warmth and welcome. Mr. Wells carefully prepared the painting for transport, ensuring it would dry properly and reach home in perfect condition. You're a natural artist, Emma, he told her. I hope you'll continue painting when you go home. I will, Emma promised. And every time I paint, I'll remember this day and how kind everyone was to me. As their visit drew to a close, Mrs. Henderson appeared with a special gift bag containing items for Emma to remember her day. A small book about the palace, some royal postcards, and a beautiful pen set for her future artistic endeavors. These are for you to keep, George explained as he presented the gifts, so you can always remember your visit to the palace. Emma hugged the gift bag carefully, then looked up at Prince George with serious eyes. Thank you for inviting me here, Prince George. This made me feel so special, like a real princess. You are a real princess, George replied earnestly. Maybe not the kind that lives in a palace, but the kind that has a brave heart and brings joy to everyone around her. That's the most important kind of princess there is. As they prepared to leave, Emma's energy was clearly flagging, but her spirits remained high. The afternoon had been everything she could have dreamed of and more, creating memories that would sustain her through whatever challenges lay ahead. As their magical afternoon at Buckingham Palace came to an end, Emma walked slowly back through the grand corridors, her small hand holding tightly to her father's while she carried her precious painting and gifts. Despite her obvious fatigue, she kept turning back to look at the magnificent rooms they were leaving behind, as if trying to memorize every detail. Prince George walked alongside them, pointing out portraits and artifacts they had missed earlier, making sure Emma's final moments in the palace were just as special as her first. He could see that she was tired, but her eyes still sparkled with wonder and gratitude. Before you go, George said as they approached the entrance hall, there's one more thing I'd like to show you. He led them to a large window that offered a perfect view of the palace gardens in the late afternoon light. The setting sun painted everything in warm golden tones, making the formal gardens look like something from a fairy tale. This is my favorite view of our home, George explained to Emma. I wanted you to see it this way, so you could remember how beautiful everything looked when you were here. Emma pressed her face to the window, drinking in the sight. "It looks like a painting," she whispered. "Like something from one of my storybooks." "That's exactly right," Prince William said, joining them at the window. "Sometimes real life can be just as magical as any story." Princess Catherine knelt down beside Emma one final time. "Emma, I want you to know how much joy you've brought to our family today. Your kindness and curiosity have made this afternoon special for all of us." Emma looked up at the princess with serious eyes. "Thank you for making me feel so welcome. I was nervous when I first arrived, but you made me feel like I belonged here." Guard Williams watched this exchange with deep emotion, understanding that his daughter was experiencing something that would shape her forever. The royal family had not merely been polite to a sick child. They had genuinely opened their hearts to her. As they made their way to the waiting car, Mrs. Henderson appeared with one final surprise. "Emma," she said warmly, "Prince George asked me to give you this." She handed Emma a small leather-bound journal with her name embossed in gold letters on the cover. Inside, the first page contained a handwritten note from Prince George. "Dear Emma, thank you for showing me what true bravery looks like. Use this journal to write about your adventures and draw more beautiful pictures. Remember that you will always have friends at the palace. With admiration and friendship, Prince George." Emma read the note slowly, her eyes growing wide behind her mask. "He thinks I'm brave?" she asked her father in amazement. "You are brave, sweetheart," Guard Williams replied, his voice thick with pride. "You're the bravest person I know." As they reached the car, Emma turned to face the royal family one last time. Despite her exhaustion, she performed another small curtsy, just as she had practiced. "Thank you for the most wonderful day of my life," she said formally, then added with childhood directness, "I hope I can come back someday." "You're always welcome here, Emma," Prince George replied sincerely. "This will always be your palace, too." The car pulled away slowly, with Emma waving from the back window until the palace disappeared from view. Inside the vehicle, she clutched her painting and new journal, chattering excitedly to her father about everything she had experienced. "Daddy, did you see how kind they were? Prince George talked to me like I was important, and Princess Catherine was so beautiful and nice. And I got to sit on a real throne." Guard Williams listened to his daughter's excited recounting, marveling at the transformation that had taken place. The listless, worried child who had been struggling with her illness had been replaced by an animated little girl full of joy and wonder. Back at the palace, the royal family gathered in the drawing room where Emma had created her painting. The easel was still set up, and small drops of colorful paint on the table served as reminders of their young visitor's artistic enthusiasm. "She's remarkable," Princess Catherine said softly, the way she approached everything with such openness and gratitude, despite everything she's going through. Prince William nodded thoughtfully. "Children like Emma remind us why our roles matter. It's not about the ceremonies or the formal duties. It's about moments like this when we can use our position to bring real joy to someone who needs it." Prince George stood by the window, looking out at the gardens where Emma had spotted the squirrel. He felt different somehow, as if the afternoon had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. "I learned something today," he said quietly. "I always thought being royal meant having people serve us, but today I realized it's really about serving others." Emma gave us more than we gave her. His parents exchanged a meaningful look, recognizing the wisdom in their son's words. This was exactly the kind of understanding they had hoped he would develop as he grew into his future responsibilities. Meanwhile, the car carrying Emma and her father arrived back at St. Mary's Children's Hospital. Word of Emma's special day had somehow spread through the pediatric ward, and several nurses and other patients were waiting to hear about her palace adventure. Sister Mary helped Emma back into her hospital room, noting with professional satisfaction that despite her fatigue, the child seemed emotionally energized in a way she hadn't been in months. "How do you feel, darling?" Sister Mary asked as she helped Emma into her pajamas. "Tired," Emma admitted, "but the best kind of tired. Like when you've had the most wonderful dream, except it was real." Dr. Mitchell arrived for her evening rounds just as Emma was settling into bed with her new journal. The physician had been curious all day about how the palace visit would affect her young patient, both physically and emotionally. "I hear you had quite an adventure today," Dr. Mitchell said with a smile as she checked Emma's vital signs. "Oh, Dr. Mitchell, it was amazing." Emma launched into an excited description of her day, From the throne room to the art session to the view from the balcony. As she listened to Emma's enthusiastic account, Dr. Mitchell observed something remarkable. The child's color was better than it had been in weeks. Her energy level seemed improved, and most importantly, she was displaying an emotional vitality that had been absent during the darkest days of her treatment. "And look," Emma said, showing her the painting she had created. "I painted the palace, but I made it show how happy it made me feel." Dr. Mitchell studied the artwork with professional interest. The bright colors, the smiling figures, and the overall joyful composition suggested a significant positive shift in Emma's mental state. "This is beautiful, Emma," she said sincerely. "You've captured something very special here." As visiting hours ended and Guard Williams prepared to leave for the night, he bent down to kiss his daughter goodnight. Emma was already drowsy, but she clutched her new journal against her chest. "Daddy," she murmured sleepily, "will you tell me the story about today before I go to sleep?" "Of course, sweetheart," he replied, settling into the chair beside her bed. As Guard Williams recounted the day's events in gentle, soothing tones, Emma drifted off to sleep with a smile on her face. For the first time in months, she fell asleep not thinking about her illness or her fears, but about golden windows, chocolate cake, and a young prince who had treated her like the most important person in the world. The palace visit had created ripples of joy that extended far beyond the afternoon itself, touching lives and creating memories that would endure long after the immediate magic had faded. 3 weeks after Emma's magical visit to Buckingham Palace, the ripples of that extraordinary afternoon continued to spread in ways no one could have anticipated. The story had been kept private, shared only among palace staff and the hospital team, but its impact was profound and lasting. Emma's recovery had taken a remarkable turn. Dr. Mitchell documented improved energy levels, better appetite, and most significantly, a renewed fighting spirit that seemed to strengthen her body's response to treatment. The little girl who had been withdrawn and fearful was now animated and hopeful, spending her days writing in her journal and creating new artwork inspired by her palace adventure. "It's quite extraordinary," Dr. Mitchell explained to Guard Williams during one of their regular consultations. "While I can't say definitively that the palace visit influenced her medical improvement, the psychological boost has been undeniable. Hope and joy are powerful medicines." Emma had filled dozens of pages in her journal, writing about her day at the palace and drawing pictures of everything she remembered. She had also begun creating artwork for other children in the hospital, sharing stories of her adventure, and spreading the same sense of wonder that Prince George had given to her. Guard Williams returned to his duties at Buckingham Palace with a transformed perspective on his service. The gratitude he felt toward the royal family had deepened his commitment to his role, but more importantly, he had witnessed firsthand the character of the family he protected. Every morning when he took his position, he carried with him the memory of Prince George's compassion and the kindness shown to his daughter. Word of Emma's visit had quietly circulated among the palace staff, creating an atmosphere of warmth and pride. Many employees had served the royal family for years without witnessing such a personal act of kindness, and it reinforced their sense of working for something meaningful, rather than merely maintaining an institution. Prince George had been profoundly affected by the experience as well. His tutors noticed increased engagement in lessons about social responsibility and public service. He asked more questions about the role of the monarchy in modern society and showed genuine interest in finding ways to make a positive difference in people's lives. "I want to understand how we can help more families like Guard Williams and Emma," George told his parents one evening over dinner. "There must be other people who work for us who are facing difficult situations." Prince William and Princess Catherine exchanged proud glances. Their son was developing exactly the kind of empathy and social awareness they had hoped to instill in him. "That's a wonderful instinct, George," his mother replied. "Perhaps we could work with Mrs. Henderson to create a more formal way of supporting our staff during difficult times. Not everyone would want or need a palace visit, but there might be other ways to help." This conversation led to the establishment of a discreet staff welfare program, providing additional support for employees facing medical crises, family emergencies, or financial hardships. While it was implemented quietly and without fanfare, the program became a source of immense comfort and security for the hundreds of people who worked to maintain the palace and support the royal family. Mrs. Henderson found herself coordinating not just the new welfare program, but also an increasing number of requests from children's hospitals and charities, hoping for similar visits from the royal family. Prince George's act of kindness had inadvertently opened a new avenue for royal engagement with sick children. "We need to be thoughtful about this," Mrs. Henderson explained to the royal family during a planning meeting. "We can't accommodate every request, but perhaps we could establish a program for occasional visits, carefully selected to have the maximum positive impact." Mr. Christopher Wells, the court artist who had worked with Emma, volunteered to develop an art therapy program that could be offered during such visits. He had been moved by Emma's natural creativity and her ability to express joy through her artwork, despite her difficult circumstances. "Art has a unique power to heal," he explained to Prince George during one of their conversations about the program. "Emma showed me that children often understand this instinctively. We could help more children express their feelings and find beauty, even in difficult situations." 1 month after her palace visit, Emma achieved a significant medical milestone. Her latest tests showed marked improvement, and Dr. Mitchell felt optimistic enough to discuss plans for her eventual discharge from the hospital. "We're not out of the woods yet," the doctor cautioned Guard Williams, "but Emma's progress has been remarkable. Her spirit and determination are contributing significantly to her recovery." Emma celebrated the news by completing a special drawing for Prince George. She had been working on it secretly for weeks, creating a detailed picture of the palace as she remembered it, but this time including images of all the hospital staff who had cared for her. "I want to show Prince George that kindness spreads," she explained to her father. "He was kind to me, so I'm trying to be kind to everyone here at the hospital. And Sister Mary and Dr. Mitchell have been kind too, so they should be in the picture." Guard Williams arranged to deliver Emma's artwork to the palace through Mrs. Henderson. When Prince George received the drawing, he was struck by its message. Emma had painted a chain of kindness connecting the palace to the hospital, with small figures holding hands all the way between the two buildings. Along with the artwork, Emma had written a letter. "Dear Prince George, thank you for teaching me that being royal isn't about wearing crowns or living in palaces. It's about making other people feel special and important. I'm trying to be royal like you by being kind to everyone I meet. I hope I can visit the palace again someday, but even if I can't, I will always remember what you taught me. Your friend, Princess Emma." Prince George read the letter several times, deeply moved by Emma's understanding of what he had tried to demonstrate. Her insight that royalty was about character rather than title showed a wisdom that exceeded her years. That evening, Prince George shared Emma's letter and artwork with his family. As they studied the drawing together, they realized that Emma had captured something profound about the nature of service and leadership. "She's right, you know," Prince William said thoughtfully. "True nobility has nothing to do with birth or title. It's about how we treat others, especially those who need our help." The experience with Emma had created a template for meaningful royal engagement that would influence the family's approach to public service for years to come. It had shown them that the most powerful acts were often the most personal ones, performed away from cameras and publicity, focused entirely on bringing comfort and joy to individuals in need. 6 months later, Emma was discharged from the hospital, her treatment complete and her prognosis excellent. On her last day at St. Mary's Children's Hospital, she left behind a large mural she had painted on the wall of the children's ward. The mural depicted a magnificent palace with golden windows, surrounded by children of all ages playing in beautiful gardens. At the bottom of the mural, Emma had written a simple message: "Kindness is the most royal thing of all." Guard Williams continued his service at Buckingham Palace, but now he served with the knowledge that the family he protected truly embodied the values they represented. His daughter's recovery and the compassion shown to his family had transformed his understanding of what it meant to serve the crown. Prince George grew into his role with the wisdom that Emma had helped him discover, that true leadership meant using one's position and privileges to lift others up, to bring light into dark places, and to remember that every person deserves to be treated with dignity and kindness. The palace corridors continued to echo with the daily business of royal life, but they also carried the memory of a little girl's laughter and the profound lesson that sometimes the most important acts of kingship happen not in throne rooms or state dinners, but in quiet moments of human connection. Emma's painting of the palace, with its golden windows and chain of kindness, hung in Prince George's private study, a daily reminder that the greatest crowns are invisible, and the most lasting kingdoms are built not on power, but on love.